In the last video, I showed you how if I want to compile main class.cs and I want to reference farm, which is not in here, I still can, because the farm assembly is located in the same directory as the C# compiler. Here's the C# compiler, and if I scroll down a little further, we'll see the farm assembly residing right there. So I can reference farm assembly and input main class.cs, and all is well. Now we have main class.exe, but when I try to execute main class.exe, the runtime, not the compiler, the runtime hiccups and says, hey, I'm trying to locate this farm and I can't find it. I need some help. The C# compiler looks in the current directory we are compiling from to locate an assembly. It also looks here, as I showed in the last video, but the runtime does not. The runtime looks for assemblies either in the directory we are executing from, in this case it would be me C# code, or it looks in subdirectories of this directory, or it looks in the GAC, and that all depends on whether you signed your assembly or not. In previous videos I showed you if you sign your assembly and it's in the GAC, then the CLR will use the one in the GAC before using one in the local directory. Anytime you have a strongly named assembly, the CLR will always look in the GAC first, and if it can't find it, then it will look in the local directory. Now, I also said the CLR looks in subdirectories, and I'm going to show that to you. But first, we need to get farm DLL back into this local directory here. So I'm going to just right-click on this, copy it, bring up our directory here, paste the farm in here, so now it's right next to where main class.exe is. And now I can say, hey, main class.exe, and we get, Jamie's Moo version 1. Now, just for tickles, I have told you that the .NET does not care about these file extensions as far as assembly is concerned. Assemblies are identified by their name, version, public key token, and not version. How long's that been there? Their culture. Oh, I hope I haven't made too many videos with version on there twice. Sorry if I have. Anyway, those are the 4 identifying elements of an assembly. In this case, we did not sign the farm DLL. So the only thing .NET cares about as far as the farm assembly is concerned at this point is its simple basic name. The file extension is simply there for historical reasons. We had DLLs in EXEs before .NET came out, and let's just stick with it. I can actually rename, I think it's REN is rename. I can rename farm.dll to farm.exe, and that's the contents of the directory. We now have a main class.exe and a farm.exe, but we know farm is not an executable. It does not have a main. It does not have an entry point. I can't execute farm. It'll say, hey, not valid, but I still know it's a managed.NET assembly. And main class.exe we know references farm. In fact, let me ildasm/out moo.text main class.exe, hit enter, look at moo.text, and in, that's a big font, format font. Let's take that down a few notches. We can see here where we reference the farm. We're just saying, hey, there's an assembly. It's external to this assembly. And it's called farm, and I'm looking for version 1. .NET does not care about the .dll extension. It's only caring about farm. So watch what happens. I can say main class.exe, and when I run this and it tries to find the farm assembly, it still will because it's right here. So when .NET is trying to locate an assembly, it probes. It looks around. It kind of investigates, saying, I'm looking for farm. I'm looking for farm. Anyone seen a farm? And when it does, it looks for farm.dll and it looks for farm.exe. If it finds either one, then it will open that file and say, hey, are you the farm I'm looking for? Looks like you are. Let me use you. This is also true with signed assemblies. Let's erase all of our compiled code thus far and list the contents of the directory. We can erase the moo stuff as well. And let's say C# compiler. Let's make our farm again. Control KU, Control KC, save. C# compiler. Please target a library. The output file will be farm.dll. This time I want to sign it with key file will be Jamie's key.strongname key. and the input file will be main class.cs. All is well. We've done that in several videos prior to this one. Let me bring this back in. C# compiler, please reference farm.dll, and I want to compile main class.cs. All is fine and dandy, and now main class.exe references a strongly named farm assembly. All right, let's execute that. We see it runs just fine. I can again rename farm.dll to farm.exe, and even with strong names, it doesn't change anything. I can still execute, and .NET will find it. Now, the local directory is one place that .NET will probe for an assembly. And I already said, in the case of a signed assembly, .NET will first probe the GAC and then come back to here. In the case of an unsigned assembly, well, we can't even put unsigned assemblies in the GAC, so .NET won't even look in the GAC for unsigned assemblies. Once it comes back here, it looks in the local directory, which we've used in several videos prior to this one. It will also search for an assembly in subdirectories, which we can specify, but there's also one default. It will look in the subdirectory named the same as the simple name of the assembly. For example, farm.dll, this assembly's simple name is farm. So I can say, hey, let's make a directory called farm, and then I think there's, can I say move farm.dll into the farm directory. And of course, I can't find farm.dll because I renamed it to farm.exe. I should list the contents of the directories. We have here the farm directory. I'm going to move farm.exe into the farm directory. Clear the screen, list the contents of the directory. I'm going to execute main class.exe again. Farm.dll.exe. It's no longer in this local directory, but .NET will probe this subdirectory called farm to find it. So main class.exe, and this is a runtime probe. This is not a compile time probe. We're running our code and everything is fine and dandy. Let me rename the farm directory to moo instead, and now we have a moo directory down here. When I execute main class.exe, .NET chokes and says, hey, I probed around where I'm supposed to probe around to find that farm assembly, and I just couldn't find it. There you go. So hopefully I'm hoping you understand, or are starting to understand, that assemblies are identified by their name. Okay, and their name can be made up of these four things. I know we haven't talked about culture yet, we will, but their name can be made up of these four things. If it's signed, then .NET is definitely wanting to identify an assembly by these four things. If it's not signed, .NET will identify the assembly by just its simple name. But the file extension has nothing to do with the identity of an assembly. .NET only uses the file name when trying to probe for an assembly. Now, in the next video, I'm going to show you how we can customize a little bit these subfolders where .NET looks. I mean, I could rename this I could rename the moo directory back to farm, and main class.exe runs just fine because .NET probes the farm directory looking for the farm assembly. We can also add our own custom probing paths, and I'll show that to you in the next video.